Hi, it's Greg Dean from Vegan Action Global and the Explore Live podcast. And today, I am lucky to have Terry, who is the founder of Vegan Action, and Carl with us today. So it starts in Melbourne, Vegan Action Melbourne. It's started moving, and we have an amazing story to tell today. And I don't think we would be actually in this space where we're running a podcast if not for you, Terry, just getting out there and showing up every single week.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, look, it is close to me. It all started with one pig, really. Not really in Melbourne. It was one pig in the Philippines that I saw being murdered. I described it as a murder at the time, as a non-vegan and a pig and cow and chicken eater and all the rest of them. I was just going through life, bumbling through life, thinking I was a decent person, said I loved animals, said I was against cruelty to animals. And I just stumbled across this murder of a poor innocent pig, and I'm guessing he was probably a year old, going by his size when I look back now, screaming his lungs out like a 6-year-old girl, and I couldn't rescue. I went to rescue a little girl, I thought, and it wasn't. It turned out to be a pig. 2 men dragging him across the backyard, and a third man stabbed him. And it was just the most horrific thing I've ever seen. I called it murder. I said, that was just murder. And then a guy with a knife, he turned, he looked at me, and that was the most chilling moment that I've probably ever had. It was, I knew I was the man with the knife at that point. I just, what have I been doing? And it was, I told a guy at work a couple of weeks ago that I felt like being hit in the face with a shovel with hypocrite written on it as it came towards my face. This big word, hypocrite. And I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know what vegan was then at that time. I'd only ever heard it referred to as a diet choice, probably 8 or 10 years earlier. I wasn't big on social media. I just got on Facebook, just learning to use it. And a couple of months later, I found an old workmate, and he was vegetarian when we worked together. We had a long chat one evening. I was in the Philippines. He was back in Melbourne, and he said, by the way, at the end, he said, by the way, I'm vegan now. Check out my page. And I went on his page, and it was just animal suffering, slaughterhouses, farms. I can't remember where, when, which animals even now. It's 9 years ago. 9 years ago, around about now, or a month ago or so. I don't know the date. And after 5 minutes of scrolling, my girlfriend walked in, and she heard the screams from the videos, and what was that? And I just looked up at her and said, we're going vegan. And she went, what's that? And I said, it's having nothing to do with this. And it just ended there. And we had some milk in the fridge. I think she finished that. I went and bought soy milk that was disgusting. I couldn't ever go back. And I learned more and more. I learned more about Facebook. I followed this friend of mine. He then went off Facebook, but I picked up a couple of friends through him, and then that's where it all grew from.
Okay.
Then I found Earthling Ed and Joey, Earthlings Experience. I saw them do a lineup with TVs and a plain white mask. I went, that's something I could do. I know I can talk. I know I can speak. And back at school, I had a teacher two teachers in my last report said, Terry, needs to do more. His writing's got to be better, but he always asks difficult questions. And I've turned that now into, as my expertise. I just get people in a situation, into a position with some very, very uncomfortable questions. And I was telling Carl beforehand that it really is my ratio. Out of 10 conversations, I get 7 to 8 having completely open-minded, completely understanding, many of them declaring themselves to go vegan there on the spot. And it's 2 or 3 out of 10 literally tell me to F off and walk away. And that's because of that last final question where they couldn't handle it, and they couldn't handle facing each other, facing themselves. And they just put their hands up and run away. And obviously it made an impact. That's how I feel my conversation ratio goes. Carl, I think he's heard a few of them, and what I say works. These questions work. They just pop up. They come out as I'm doing it.
So, Carl, how do you come into all of this with activism? Tell me quickly your background and what drives you there.
And he's our best thing, mate.
I wouldn't say that, but I was reminded, his kind of origin story. Mine's quite comical, in that it was about 20 years ago, and took a gal on. It was our first date, and I guess I'm kind of known for this, but I splurged quite heavily on our first date. I got us a limo for the day. Was taking her designer, shopping, all this. And, of course, had the limo like fully stocked with all sorts of alcohol and whatnot. So first thing, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, and she's getting lit. I mean, we're both getting, quite lit with alcohol. And on the way to the designer stores, we passed by a McDonald's, or as they say here, Macca's. And she said, "I want to stop and get some McDonald's." I was like, "Why? Like, no, we don't need to do that." And she just got like more and more upset, at me, just like was really insisting that we pull the stretch limo through McDonald's. And yeah, I said, no, we don't need to do that. It just got to be, a real argument. And she said, "You know what? Fine, then we're going to be vegetarians." And I was like, okay. So from that day on, I haven't eaten an animal. Yeah, and it did take me probably too long to come around to veganism. It's just as you do, I guess, not being vegan, knowing that there's a whole part of your life that isn't ethical, and you do the same as a vegetarian. You know that the dairy isn't ethical. You know that, that there's certain parts of your ethic that don't agree with your values, that don't line up with your values. It took me probably 15 odd years before really that alignment ended up happening. But yeah, it wasn't like a light bulb switch on. It was just like, this is how I should live. But really, once I made that transition from it, thinking about it as a diet into a set of ethics, and aligning my values to that set of ethics, to my actions, it was all really quite easy. Getting into activism, it wasn't until Terry stood up at Vegan Campout. He was only, a few people over from me on the main stage, and that was just kind of like an open air Q&A type session. But he got up, and I remember the line was like, he said, "You vegans need to get off your asses and get out on the street and join us, and we need you." And I looked at the shirt he's wearing, Vegan Action Melbourne, and I was like, "Oh, he's in Melbourne too. I really don't have an excuse now." So sure enough, like, when we got back from Vegan Campout, I went to, the first outreach, and that was nearly 2 years ago now. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster ever since, but a good one. We've really, I think, grown Vegan Action Melbourne. I think we've seen veganism grow, and we've seen our activism grow. We've done a lot.
We've got better
these past 2 years. So we've gotten a lot. We've gotten a lot better as activists, and we've gotten better in our outreach, and yeah, I think we're on a really good path.
And we've got a core group. Sorry, Greg. We've got this core 6 or 7 of us that come every single week, like the odd week off, but they're just absolute diehards, and it's just brilliant, I'd like to say, look, I'm pretty sure we're the most consistent. We're coming up to 3 years in a row, Greg, on Saturday, every single Saturday for 3 solid years. That will be on Melbourne Cup weekend this year. So that's, 3 years since 2022. So 156 Saturdays in a row.
Sure. And one thing I really wanted to point out is the term vegan action. So in terms of Vegan Action Melbourne, so Vegan Action Brisbane, Vegan Action Sydney, and wherever it goes. And I'll admit, when I first started getting involved, I was erring on the side of the term vegan action because there were groups like Anonymous for the Voiceless out there and, animal, just variations. But the term vegan itself always had a negative connotation in the eyes of the general public. And I pondered on that for a little while. And through a few conversations and reflecting upon my own morals and how the general public want us to go away and how the industry want us to go away and how they use the term vegan as a negative connotation, I was the view is we need to take that word back and make it what it is, the ethical stance and moral stance, a stronger stance, and something to show that no matter how much someone pushes us around, that word is stronger, that we're willing to face it together using that word. And it doesn't matter what people call us because we're already that. And so when I considered the term vegan action, that really stood strong. The most powerful aspect to it is that word. And then following that is the action.
Right.
What are we doing? You can be vegan and you can be an online activist. You can show up every now and then. But vegan action is about getting out there and doing something.
That's
and
right.
It doesn't need to be for some people showing up every single week. But the problem is only the same core people are showing up every week. It's the same 5 to the same 6. And you'll find that new people start activism, they get involved with it, they show up for a few weeks, and then they disappear. They disappear into the ether, or they will disappear into a different human-centric protest issue. And you'll see them showing up to human protests every single week. I lump them all together because there are endless amounts of human-centric issues, and there never will be an end to that. But vegans have one cause and animals have one cause, and that is vegan for the animals and only for the animals. To be clear, you can be a Buddhist vegan, you can be a Muslim vegan, you can be a Christian vegan, you can be a racist vegan, you can be a transphobe vegan, you can be all of the worst possible things in the world. But the term vegan is for the animals. And there is absolutely no dilution of that term to include any human-centric issues whatsoever. And we invite everybody to attend, no matter their background. But when they show up, they're there for the animals. They don't need to talk about their political ideologies. They just need to be there for the one cause for that 1 week. And if they don't want to show up with, say, Christians don't want to show up with Muslims, doesn't matter. Start their own group. It's okay. The idea is action.
Yeah, we've had this discussion quite a bit, Greg, before I even met you. But we're quite proud of the fact of that vegan action is our name.
We do.
And it's not to take away from other groups, because everybody does have a good place.
I wanted to do.
Yeah, within the movement. So we don't want to take anything away from anyone, but we're quite proud of the fact that I think we're the really only one, especially in Melbourne anyway, that uses vegan in our name. It seems like other groups almost want to take that back and almost hide the fact that we're animal activists, or that they're animal activists when they're in the street doing activism. And I've been there. I've worked in those camps. I've seen how they work and how they are frankly effective in some ways. But yeah, I think that it is quite powerful, and it'll never change, that for each branch of vegan action that we do, whether it be Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Kent, Essex, and the other ones that we're talking about getting set up, they're all vegan action. They're all at their core for the animals, as you're saying, and I think that we should talk about it more, about the intersectionality issue. But yeah, it's always going to be vegan, and it's always going to be action, and we're actually quite particular about that when it comes to our membership and activists as well. Is we have people asking to join quite regularly, nearly every week. But we have a process. Like we really need to see you out on the street doing activism with us before you're going to be a part of, Vegan Action, whatever camp you're looking to join. Again, the social media stuff, as you pointed out, has its place. But like we're here to do a task. We're here to do work for the animals, and we're not here as a social club. So even though we a lot of us are really good friends, we are the last line of defense for the animals, and we need to act like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does vary week on week. And I think that's where the consistency really helps, though, is that, every Saturday from 1 to 5, you can be rest assured, no matter the weather, no matter what, holiday is on.
I am.
How sick any of us are, like, you can be rest assured that there will be a Vegan Action presence there every single week. And again, I think that's a real feather in our cap as well, that, like we have to be, if not, the most consistent Vegan Action group in Melbourne. And this isn't, to ring any bells or anything like that, but, knowing that, this Vegan Action isn't nearly what we want it to be. Like if we're taking, kind of a step back and taking the whole totality of vegans in Melbourne or vegans in Australia or vegans across the world, activists are only a very small percentage of what those, vegans actually are. And our aim, beyond converting, people that haven't thought about veganism into getting that 100 points as we put the scale to them and each other. It's talking to the vegans that were like myself, couch vegans, wanting to go to the social events, wanting to, just put that name, that vegan name, into our ethic, but not actually doing anything about it, to get them onto the street, to get them out on the street, whether it be Melbourne, Brisbane, UK, wherever, to take that step in their vegan journey.
Amy at NARD this year put it well when she said, this is Amy Vegan of Oz on Instagram. She's got thousands of followers, thousands of views. And she said, becoming vegan is where your abuse ends, but becoming an activist is where where the liberation starts.
Right.
And we should get that on the channel too.
Yep.
Those two, or that split speech.
Yep.
But if you just want to go back a couple of minutes, both of you, I've been listening to you discuss Vegan Action Melbourne.
Right.
It could be climate change. It could be COVID. It could be, electric car conspiracy. We're vegan. You're walking down the street, you know exactly what you're going through. And that's what I wanted. And that's what we've done. And I'm pretty pleased with myself, to be honest, to do this from a life of pretty mundane sort of life. And I feel like this has been my only success, and how I do my outreach and just the whole concept of it. I think it's a really good setup with the signage. That does, you see their heads turning as they walk through. Then they see the TV. Then we pounce. Would you like to know what we're doing? Would you like information?
Okay.
And it works.
Sure. All right. So let's delve into some deeper topics. Let's just acknowledge that the Vegan Action movement predominantly is outreach, out there, talking to people each and every day that you show up. And the idea is to connect people to their choices, and the idea is to make them consider their hypocrisies, make them feel guilty at the end of the day, connect them to that guilt that's inherent in each of us, and remove hypocrisies and remove animals from our plates in all aspects. So from clothing to meals to even any choices to do with animal exploitation we need to end. So I want to kind of acknowledge, first of all, we're out there doing outreach, but there's inherently a thing that drives each and every human. And part of that is empathy. But unfortunately, that's been lost. And I want to kind of get into that a little bit, if you're happy to.
Yep.
If we were talking about human empathy, where does that drive come from? Where do you think empathy comes from? And where do you think it sits inside you?
Yeah, well, it's obviously a broader question than what's going through my mind, but just kind of coming back to your kind of previous framing of an outreach, getting people to feel guilty in this. It was actually like kind of circling in my mind when you were saying those things. But what I've been finding some success with in my outreach is everybody does require an individual approach. So, it's quickly deducing what approach is going to work best with a certain individual. But I think that when you brought empathy, it was at the forefront of my mind, Greg, that when I can connect to that person's empathy as quickly as possible, that's usually what results in more successful outreach. So where I find that empathy to lie is that nearly everyone thinks of themselves as animal lovers. So, where we're positioned on Burke Street, we have thousands of people walking by us, and I can nearly guarantee you that every single one of those people thinks of themselves as an animal lover. Yet every single one of those people nearly, is not vegan, unfortunately.
And that would be decent.
Right. Yeah. They think that they're decent animal lovers and ethical.
Yeah.
So it's connecting what I think that most people, and there's people that say this all the time anyway, but that almost everybody is actually like pretty much vegan in their heart, already. Of course, there's like some sociopaths out there that want to create violence and want to create destruction, but that's not most people. So it's connecting that empathy that you brought up back to, aligning with their actions, aligning with their values, and making that, consistent effort from now. And that's what Terry's really good at. Probably the best on the team is kind of framing it in that sense that the decision is now. Either you take the step forward or you don't. There is no I'm going to be mostly vegan from this conversation. I'm going to be, I'm going to try. Like when anybody says that to Terry, he shuts it down so quick, because that trying allows you that kind of flexibility in your mind to say, well, yeah, I told those guys on Burke Street that I'd try, but you know what? The family's eating steak tonight and whatever. I'm just going to make it easier. It's about, aligning your what you say is you as an animal lover to, standing up at dinner and saying, you know what, I don't believe in this. I don't believe that, this animal should have suffered for your 5 minutes of pleasure. I don't believe that their life is worth that. I had a great talk with Terry today, and he just made it ultra clear in my mind. And this is how I'm going to live my life. And he's really good at getting people to understand that there is no halfway in veganism. There's no halfway in empathy. And if we want to frame it back in any other ethical approach that humankind has taken, there's no halfway non-racist. It's either you're racist or you're not. It's an ethical choice, just like veganism. Like either you're vegan or you're not, and you've got to own it. Own it one way or the other. Again, I don't know, I'm probably speaking too much for Terry, but I'm constantly learning from him every single week that we're out there, learning how to understand, how to, get people to understand where they're coming from, and also to act on it.
Okay.
I nail them, don't I, when they say trying?
Yeah.
Just nail them. The best response I actually found is, so when you put your hand on a box of eggs or a packet of bacon, is that trying to be vegan? And I go, no. I go, so why are you doing it? And then I move into, would you want your boyfriend to try to stop abusing you, or, racial, abuse at work? Would you want them to try to stop or stop? And that's where but first of all, I say, next time you put your hand on an animal product, is that trying to be vegan? It's obvious you're not, and then I use the word choose. Many people, Greg, I've worked, this is 2 or 3 years, or years or 6 years. People think, when they say it's my choice to not be vegan. Yeah, we choose to be vegan. Us three here, we've chosen to be vegan. But they're also, what they have forgotten, and what I forgot before, is I chose not to be vegan because it's so normal. I'm going to quote Gary because I love him so much. It's been normalized for so long, we don't even see them as victims. Mm. So to walk in a supermarket and you normally pick up the bacon from there and the eggs from there and the cheese from there and the milk from down there, you are choosing that. So I just try and get them to realize that they've just got to make the choice on the plant-based meats and the vegan cheese and the plant milk. So, and it helps them to actually realize that they are choosing to not be vegan rather than they think there's only one choice, and that's to be vegan.
There's also a choice to be thoughtless, and that's where most people sit. As you said, Carl, that most people are vegan in their heart, and the other side of the coin is, even though they might be vegan in their heart, their choices, their spending habits don't align with that. And so they go with the easiest option. They go with the brainwashed option. They go with the option where they've been told all their lives that this is the safest and best way to eat and consume. And that's what they go and do. So when they go to the shops and they grab a pack of bacon and they grab a pack of steaks and they just chuck it in their trolley without even thinking about it. This is what we're going to do for dinner tonight. They don't pause for a moment like we do and say, who suffered for this?
Right.
Who was tortured for this? People think about that in terms of, child abuse. So I see animal abuse the same as child abuse because animals are children. They've got children minds. They've got children innocence. And whenever people make these choices, they're abusing children. And so when people pick up a pack of steaks, that's how I'm looking at it. When I pick up a piece of vegan food, I know I'm not having that feeling. But I know that if I picked up a piece of steak, I would be remembering the torture that somebody endured for that thing to be there in front of me right now. That's how I would feel.
The saying is that ignorance is bliss, and unfortunately that rings true too many times. And everybody leads a difficult life. Like we all have things that we struggle with, and people are just too quick to dismiss the suffering of those victims because it's blissful to ignore it. Then animal agriculture industry does its fair share, contributing billions of dollars into that willful ignorance by, characterizing that suffering in these nice, neat little packages to say that, they're cage free or that it's ethically sourced, which we all know is bullshit. And we get that every single week as well, Craig, where, and I'm sure you would as well, where people come up to us and they're like, well, what if it was ethically done? Like that somehow excuses the murder and the suffering that they're paying for, but that's what the industry wants to happen. That's the ignorance that they want people to believe. So when you're confronted with the truth, and most people do know the truth of the fact that they pay these slaughterhouse salaries, they just don't want to be. They just don't want that ignorance to be lifted. They don't want that bliss to be going away. So yeah, I mean, being an activist, a vegan activist, and working with slaughterhouse footage, talking with slaughterhouse workers, knowing the pain and the suffering that these animals are going through is horrific. But what we say to the people that we're outreaching is that pain can lift by living vegan. You can get outside of that guilt and that shame by leading your life in such a way that that you're not paying for it anymore. But if you step away from this conversation and you're finding excuses to keep that suffering going, then
you're going to suffer.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be the case that you're going to be feeling bad about your choices moving forward.
We talk about ignorance as bliss, how we get to the end of our lives and have a lot of regrets.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people do. They wish they could have loved more. They wish they could have worked less. Some people wish they'd had a legacy. Some people had so many wishes. Oh, I wish I'd done this and I wish I'd done that. And when you and I look back on our lives, we are with less regret because not only did we take a stance to remove torture from our choices, but we encouraged others to do that as well. There's people out there, they can be vegan and they'll get to the end of their lives and say, gosh, I wish I'd spoken out more about this. Well, yeah, you had your chance. And for all those people, you have your chance right now.
Right.
Just where you were a minute ago, and then Carl went to about when we're talking with someone and they feel guilty and to get rid of that. About 4 weeks ago, Greg, we've got that picture, you might remember it, with the Australian egg industry. In the Australian egg industry, male chicks are ground up on their first day of life. And this elderly guy is probably 10 years older than me, Greg. So he's probably 70, maybe plus 65, 68. He's looked at me. I stood near it and he's looked at me and he said, is that real? I said, yeah. Yeah. That's what they do here. It's a big blender. Some places gas them. Overseas, they bury them, incinerate them, drown them, do all sorts of things. I said, they're wastage. And we spoke again a couple of minutes more. I told him about the debeaking, I think. And within minutes, he was shaking. He went to shake my hand with the thumb, with the thumb upwards. And he squeezed my hand so tight and he was shaking and his lips were trembling. A tear came down his eye. And I said, this pain goes away when you become vegan. And he could barely speak. And he just said, I'm going vegan. But it squeezed my fingers were going, my hand was going white. And he just kept onto it. And I've never had only took 3 minutes. He was with me 3 or 4 minutes. We didn't get a mic on it or anything. It was really quiet. We were just right at the side. I don't even think anyone saw us really. Someone saw an old fella walk up to me and he walked away. But that's what it did to him. And I said, this is your chance, go vegan and the pain goes away.
Pain goes away when you go vegan.
Yeah.
Yep. And coming back off the point that you just made, Greg, it's not only vegan activism, but it's everything really good that I've done in my life, like especially that's kind of challenging, your everyday routine, is that if you want to do something, if you want to stand up for the animals, you will find every reason to do so. If you don't, if you want to slip back into old habits, if you want to be a couch vegan, if you want to be a socialite vegan and not stand up for the animals, you'll find every excuse not to. You'll be too busy. It'll be too cold. It'll be rain. You'll find any reason you can justify whatever action you've already wanted to choose. And we're only asking that people choose to stand up for these beings because we literally are the last line of defense. We literally are the only things the animals have. And, that also touches back on the intersectionality issue as well, is that, we've chosen to focus our efforts right onto the animals. We know that the animal holocaust is the biggest holocaust that happens in all of society, has been for thousands of years, and hopefully is ending soon, but it won't end soon unless we focus our efforts on stopping that holocaust, on stopping the exploitation of animals, full stop. Of animals. As human beings, of course, we have other issues that we care about, that we're passionate about. But as activists, we find that we can't give enough of our time and attention and energy to stopping this Holocaust. It's way bigger than us, and it needs every single minute that we can give it.
We can't end a war in Ukraine between the three of us. Our opinions don't do anything. Shouting in the street doesn't do anything. But being vegan, you can do right now. To any non-vegans listening to this.
Which is interesting. I wanted to touch on something. It's a sensitive topic in the vegan activist community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because this podcast today is centered around the work that we're doing and outreach specifically and showing up and doing animal rights activism and the reasons that drive us to do so, I wanted to discuss the impact of the divide that's been slowly happening in the animal rights community and how it's actually now slowly coming back to where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, the only exception that I would take it is the fact that it's been slow. I compared to you guys, I'm a relatively new activist, but it's been quite forceful in recent times. That not only will we have activists who were formerly focused on the plight of the animals nearly exclusively, if not wholly exclusively, to now almost fully focused on the plight of human beings, fully, if not exclusively. Well, on its face, we've lost those good activists to fight with us in the street because everybody only has 24 hours in the day. So now, those people's efforts have almost certainly, been somewhat mitigated by human rights issues. So that's one part of it. The other part that's been, pretty frustrating, honestly, for Terry and I and quite a few others is that, unfortunately, there has been a segment of those people that have directly opposed the work that we're doing as animal rights advocates. They counter protested, even though the National Animal Rights Day isn't a protest whatsoever. It's supposed to be a unified gesture and movement.
Everyone coming together.
Yeah, coming together to acknowledge and have really kind of a funeral setting, but also a celebration for animal rights advocacy. Unfortunately, that was counter-protested last year by people who identified themselves as Palestinian protesters, but again, just really wanting to make it clear that and vegan, but wanting to make it clear that we're not wanting to paint with one brush the actions of a few to so many. What we want to do is say that if you're going to advocate for the animals, that you should advocate for the animals. Like I think nearly everyone that is an activist with us will advocate for human rights issues in separate arenas. But unfortunately, we've been criticized and we've been counter-protested repeatedly throughout the years for saying that we're not bringing those human issues into our engagement for the animals. And to me, and this is kind of what my speech was on at NARD, but to me that does mitigate and that does water down our actions and what we're looking to do and what we're looking to tear down in terms of the animal agriculture industry.
If we were to look at other human-centric issues, we might find that those same vegan animal rights activists aren't going to the Palestinian protests and saying, hey, you can't be pro-Palestinian if you're not vegan. And they're not going to, the trans rights protests and saying if you're not an animal rights activist vegan, then you can't be a trans ally.
Right.
But on the other side, they will do the same thing to animal rights activists. And like I said earlier, you can be a Muslim vegan, you can be a Christian vegan, and unfortunately, you can be a racist vegan. By far, I'm against all forms of oppression. but my focus is on the animals and also honoring the term vegan. So you can be all of those things and still be vegan, but we don't see those people showing up and saying, hey, yeah, you can't be all these other things and be vegan, but it doesn't go in the opposite direction.
But it's actually worse than that, Greg, that not only do they criticize us for not supporting those other issues, they actually label us as being against them.
Yep.
That's what they do. Because we don't speak up for their issue, they actually assume we're on the other side.
Yep. Which is, of course, not true. And
it's quite sad.
Yeah, I said this in my speech as well. It's really quite unfortunate when those sectors have to label people like Terry and some of the other key animal rights activists in Melbourne, at least specifically, that they're somehow not allied with trans rights, or that they're not allied with the plight of Gazans, and it's just a ridiculous notion that just because we're not waving certain flags while we're trying to talk to people about their choices and maybe living a more vegan lifestyle, that somehow means that we're against those causes is ridiculous.
4 years ago, Greg, do you remember we were using the word Holocaust and we were criticised in Melbourne, and the word went out that you're anti-Semitic if you're using the word Holocaust? Do you remember that? Yeah,
I do.
Well, I've now been labelled Zionist. I've gone from anti-Semitic for using, and I've changed nothing in my stance. My stance hasn't changed anywhere. I'm
okay.
Peace. Give us peace, man. That's all.
Yeah, and now because hopefully some of these people are listening to it, but think about what the end result of those actions and that kind of language and that kind of behavior really gets you. So where do we end up? Let's say for sake of argument that you're 100% right, that Terry is now somehow against trans rights and that he's somehow now a Zionist. What that does is that's telling a certain base of people to not be vegan activists because Terry's involved with the movement.
Yeah, you'll turn into a Zionist if you become vegan.
What is your end goal? And really the end goal I see almost 100% of the time is to dilute and weaken the movement. Yeah. It's to dilute and weaken the advocacy that we're doing for these animals. Why is that? Why is that the case? Or at least if they don't see that, then look past that, kind of short-term, selfish, kind of projection that you would have on individuals and say, look, as a team, there's not, and we've already talked about it on this podcast, there's not nearly enough activists in the world doing what we're doing. You're wanting to take away from the little that we already have. You're wanting to take away from the little advocacy that the animals already have to talk about whatever human rights issue is in the news or is in your mind. I don't want to take away from any of those movements because they're all important. But where do we stop? Whether it be Gaza, whether it be right. Trans rights or whatever. Those are kind of the hot button issues now, but there's been conflict going on in Congo for decades. No one's talking about that. No one's out, on Burke Street in Sudan. Yeah, no one's talking about that for some reason. But because these issues are now in the news, because there's other friends and other movements that are happening along those lines, people are pulled towards them. But at the end of the day, for, like I said before, from thousands of years and into the foreseeable future, this animal holocaust is still happening right in front of our eyes. And that action that those activists should be taking to stop it is now being watered down and mitigated because of those causes.
Yep.
I attend different types of vegan cafes and vegan restaurants. I use the Happy Cow app when I go out. Whenever I show up, I see very ordinary looking Australians. They have nice cars. They have average cars. They wear nice clothes. Some, come out dressed in their best tracky dackies. Some people, dress nicely for going out. They walk around the vegan supermarket. They're just everyday shoppers, and they're vegan. And they do not represent the people who are really far out there, who are attending all the human-centric protests, who also claim to be vegan or animal rights activists, who are trying to drag down the small number of vegan animal rights activists that are already out there. So I want to put it out there that the people who are complaining about us not always speaking up about every other human-centric problem, they're outliers. I don't believe they make up the norm, and I believe that the people who should be speaking up and can show up to animal rights activist events are the everyday Australians who are not currently speaking out. And I want to put it out there that they don't need to be, hard line, anti-oppression. They just need to have their values in the right spot. I've got a documentary I'm about to launch onto the Vegan Action Global YouTube channel about vegan children activists. And you can see they're just raised with the right morals, and they're just very kind kids. They make sense to adults, but they're not far out there. They're just, hey, this is how simple it is.
Right.
And they are just very normal Australians. Their parents are very normal Australians.
Fine.
And that's the type of movement we need, where if you're just an ordinary person, you can just show up and you're welcome.
Right. Yeah. And that's absolutely the case. Coming back to what we do in our outreach, when we inevitably talk to the vegans that come up, is, well, here's Terry, here's Linda. We're introducing them, to the team to see that we are everyday citizens just like them. We might be characterized as extreme, activists, but we're all, just like anybody else. We're all, just citizens, just, that have their problems and have their good times and good things going as well. But it's that easy. It really is. And that's another thing that Terry was really good at in introducing me into activism, is that I was just like anyone else, where, again, you make a big change, you have some like fear and trepidation about it. But he was really good at introducing me into the whole thing, at saying, well, here's a sign, you can hold this for a while, and if you want to talk to people, you can. But, I'm here if I need to step in. And, I was just like, well, no, I've been, a debater for how many years? Like, I'm ready to talk to people right now. But, we want to probably, make it clear in this podcast as well that, it's not like, a full-on thing, especially being introduced. Like we like actually people kind of taking steps into it, versus, going full on and getting themselves into a situation that they're not comfortable with.
We don't expect them to be earthling Ed on the first or the second time,
Right.
like,
yeah,
it's working out. Like Carla said a couple of times in this, if there's any activists or vegans listening to this, like, we will mentor you. I will spend hours on the phone going through stuff with you. There's all sorts of things to watch, to learn from. I just learn from the best there is, and that's Gary, Ed, Joey. I just listened to them and I absorbed it. And now I throw it back when I get the same nonsense thrown at me.
Yep. But why we value new people coming in is because it was, again, something that we mentioned before, that every person that we outreach really requires that individual touch. And everybody has a unique story about how they, came into veganism, how they're coming into activism. And really, I think one of the strengths of Vegan Action really as a whole is that each person that does outreach in their own way does bring their individual approach to it. We're not scripted. We never will be. We don't have like certain rules to follow. We do coach and we do advise people, on approaches, but people know when you're talking to them whether you're genuine or you're not. And everybody across the Vegan Action team is quite individual in their approach, and has that level of individual empathy that I think resonates really well with everyone.
I guess some takeaways is just ordinary Australians with ordinary careers, with ordinary lives, can get out there and keep it really simple. Just show up each week or every fortnight or every month, because we have millions of vegans in the world, thousands who are speaking about it online at least. We have hundreds of people in various vegan groups. Well, we know we have a huge number in the Vegan Action groups, and all those people, if they just put 1 week aside a month, and ideally once a week, but at least once a month, you would have thousands of people out there speaking against oppression.
We've talked a lot about outreach, but in the last year and a half or so, Greg, like I'm a big fan. I heard you on another podcast say you're a big fan of Tash, and she inspired me. I look at her as if a 30-year-old woman can go screaming in a supermarket. She weighs about 50 kilo, 45 kilo. She goes in screaming, having guards, having people assault her. And I started doing it a couple of years ago, and we've done, in the last 2 years, probably 60 or 70, 80 disruptions, many outside, but we have gone inside. But we've got results, like whether it's actually from us or just from the whole movement. And one is Adidas, where we've been with the AJP outside at least 2 or 3 times, I think. I think you might have been with us, Greg, back in 21 at Nike, and Nike went kangaroo free a couple of years ago. We persisted with Adidas. We were there before Christmas with the AJP. That spurred me on. I actually got some signs off them because they're a political party. They're not prepared to go inside. I got some little signs off them, and about 10 of us went in over Christmas. Caused chaos in the Adidas store in Melbourne, in the Melbourne Central. Left it abruptly, went back a few months later. A couple of months later, they declare a kangaroo skin-free policy. The Max Mara last year. I mean, so it feels personal when you actually get a win like that, even though it wasn't just us, it was done all over the world. But all those activists that were involved with Adidas, feels like a win. And then the next one was Max Mara. Max Mara was last year. We did one of our first store disruptions. It was epic, just the way it was filmed, the way it went down. I wore a white shirt covered in blood. We went in and they didn't know what hit them. And 3 months later, our disruption was recognized as one of the most effective in the Anti-Fur Worldwide campaign. There was 35 or 38 stores hit on one day or one weekend. That was for Max Mara. 3 months later, they declared a fur-free policy. We'd gone back there weekly as well to persist outside the store. Once you're banned, the rule is you can't go in, but you can do it outside. And then we went to, followed it up, Louis Vuitton, Berluti, and Dior. The campaign is against Berluti, but the shops are so close together, so we hit them all 3. And then earlier in the year, we did them about 12 weeks in a row, over Christmas, before Christmas, up to Christmas, over it. Then we drifted off. We went to do other things. We went back to Berluti 1 week. We went back a fortnight later, and we're walking up the street. And we're looking for the store. It's across the road on Collins Street. It's closed. We felt like we had another win, even though the Berluti brand is still running. The disruptions are still happening in Europe and America and UK. But we the Baluti store in Melbourne has shut its doors, not because of us. We're not naive. We rarely saw a customer in there. But when that happens, that really feels like another win. So these things are happening. David Jones, Peter, one of their organisers, came from Sydney last September, and there's about 4 of us from Vegan Action went into David Jones in Burke Street. Kristen and I did a big speak out on the wild animal skin, and it was only 2 months later, David Jones they put the white flag up and declared a wild animal skin-free policy. This stuff works. So when you were previously talking with another podcaster about the results, it does get results. Foie gras. Do you know how the Michelin star chef selling foie gras, he was protested at his restaurant. This is a French fella. He had a whole chain of restaurants. He was protested about foie gras. And instead of trying to disperse them, he actually went and spoke to one of the protesters. The chef himself did not know how foie gras was created, how it was made. And when he was told, he learned, and he took it off all his menus in all his shops. And then he went vegan. He went all plant-based.
And to back off of what Terry's saying, to any maybe vegans that are listening to this, non-activists, while you might think that, activism is kind of doom and gloom, with the slaughterhouse footage and talking to people that, want to be ignorant and blissful, whatever, there are so many consistent wins that happen. And I even bring this into my outreach is that, every single week we're talking to people that are this close to being vegan, only need to hear, a little bit of the messaging, and they make the decision then and there. Like Terry gets people every week nearly. I got 2 last week, so while it'll never be a numbers game, like that, from those very few discussions that we have through our consistent efforts, that's thousands of lives saved. It's easy to project that. And that gives us a lot of hope. That gives us a lot of happiness, and that gives us a lot of value. And for any activist, it does the same. So I would really encourage anyone that is maybe thinking about doing a weekend or thinking about doing activism in any sense, that it is a real positive contribution to your life and that of the animals as well, of course.
I had a question for you from a devil's advocate point of view for all those people, the trolls, the vegans who don't want to get involved or think, oh gosh, what you do give us a bad name, that type of thing. What is your reasoning? Forget the fact that, you might shut these stores down. What is your reasoning for going in there and doing it? And after you give me your point of view, I'll give you my point of view as to why it's good, and my psychology behind it. But I just wanted you to see if I could dig deep into your psychology and tell us why you do it, why you're going in there and causing such mayhem when you go in there.
It's got to be better content. Has to be to get more views, which gets more people looking, more controversial.
But there's got to be more to it than that.
Well, that's why.
Like deeper. And I'll preface why I think it's a powerful thing. Because screw them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because who are they to get away with it? Who are they to be not accountable for torturing other living beings? Because if you can hold companies like Zara and other clothing companies accountable for the sheer exploitation of child labor in third world countries, and you don't bring attention to that, and if those people are out there making millions of dollars of profit off the exploitation of the innocent, then they deserve to get ramroded. They deserve for you to go in there and shine that light
I like
to
that.
bring that attention on them.
Well, twice we made it into Louis.
Screw them. That's what they deserve. They need it to happen. You need to go in there because you would not put up with that in any other context.
Yeah,
because it's wrong. It's inherently wrong to profit off torturing other living beings.
Yeah,
That's why. That's what I meant.
2 times in Louis Vuitton felt good.
And if we think about, again, veganism as an ethical movement, which it is, and we think about it again in the historical context, every ethical movement that humanity has ever had has never been pretty.
Yeah.
If we take slavery, for instance, there was like so many people, coming back from my background in the States where, well, why do we really need to, emancipate the slaves? Like, why do we need to disrupt the cotton business? That's going along quite well. That's profitable. That's sustaining families. Those kinds of arguments existed in every societal ethical change.
Yeah.
Like if we go back to, even Gandhi, going to the sea to make salt. That was disrupting, the salt trade in India. And he was, getting flack that whole time for, disrupting what was through up until then, kind of smooth and what life was. But he made a stand to actively disrupt what was not right. And that is what we're aiming to do. Yeah. We know that it's not right. Animal lovers, being vegan or not, know that it's not right, but because ignorance is bliss, they want to push that out of their minds and keep living life as smoothly as they possibly can. We need to be here to disrupt that and show them that, to make an ethical movement stick and to make it right, we need to do what's right, and we need to disrupt what exploits animals.
I think we need to establish what the opposite of vegan is and what it isn't.
Okay.
Because there's too much reference to food. Now, the non-vegans, in general, we'll call them non-vegans. But when there's a group when we're at dinner in the evening on a Saturday and we want to refer to them, what do we refer them to them as? Non-vegans is not bad enough. Non-vegans, they want a term that they are comfortable with. And that's why they use the words like meat eater. Now, they might say, I'm a meat eater but I'm okay with you being vegan. Well, it's not meat eater because 1, that refers to food. And 2, if a vegan refers to the opposite as a meat eater, what about the vegetarians? Then they feel off the hook. These are little things that grind my gears, I guess. Is vegans calling them carnists even. It refers to food. So a few years ago when Tash hit the scene and she's calling them animal abusers, and I've gone, yeah, that's a bit harsh, but it's true. Yeah, and I've gone with it all this time. Then about a year ago, a guy put a post out saying, what is the opposite? And he called them oppressor. And I went, yeah, okay, but that could be oppressor of anyone. So then I just took it one step further and turned it to animal abusing oppressor. Oh, that's a big mouthful now. So, but that is really what they should be referred to, I think, in my opinion. And like I say, the reason the non-vegans want to call themselves meat eaters is that for the same reason that they want veganism to be about food, because it's easier for a non-vegan to tell a vegan, I don't want to give up my eggs and bacon in the morning, rather than tell the vegan that I don't want to be a decent person and I want to see animals suffer. Because we want to talk about ethics, they want to talk about food. So that's where in our outreach 6 months ago, I popped up with this question, and it started in an outreach. I think I got it when I actually said right at the beginning, what do you think veganism means? And of course, they go straight to, you don't do this, you don't eat that, you don't go there, you don't wear that. And I said, that's all negative. That's a negativity. Look at it this way. It's living without harming animals, living without exploiting them. Oh, Does that sound like something you could do? Now, back in January, I was coming up with this and starting to incorporate it into my outreach right at the beginning, before you get too far in, because then you don't even touch food. Once you start talking about, are you against bullfighting? Yeah, of course. Okay. Then you believe in veganism. You believe it's wrong to kick a dog. So why is it not wrong to stab a pig or stab a cow? And this is where I've gone now in the last 5-6 months, and why I've found my outreach so effective. I've passed it on to the others, and I think Carl's using it. I heard Vic say it the other day. Nazia says it straight away, early on in the conversation. Don't let it get too far. Ask them what they're defending. Ask them what they think it means. Then you can have a conversation on the same understanding. But they literally want to take it to food because that's what they want to talk about, because it's what they don't want to give up. And talking about the exploitation for the last year online, we've managed to move it around from animal abuse to animal exploitation. The reason we abuse them is because we've already decided we can exploit them. You can exploit them for good as well. You know, the pony rides, those donkeys or ponies, they get a lovely life. They get a shed with hay, and they probably get to retire somewhere, but they're still exploited. So that is where it starts, with the word exploit, of course. But yeah, when you actually point that out to someone at the beginning of the outreach, before you've gone to food, and I literally say, do you know what it means? They say food. I say living without exploiting. Are you against bullfighting? And you've got them on your side straight away. What about rodeo? Oh yeah, that's horrible. So yeah, we've touched on outreach, but yeah, they want to call themselves meat eaters, and even a carnist. I'm a carnivore. No, you're not a carnivore for a start. But once again, it's referring to food.
I love the idea of animal exploitation as a word, as the opposite of vegan. Animal abuser is it's abuse of animals, but we also look at child labor as exploitation, but we would also say somebody who is a victim of child abuse is, directly a victim. So if somebody is abusing a child, we would say that they're a child abuser. But if somebody's sitting on the side watching it, they're not necessarily a child abuser, they're the child exploiter. And so if we were to look at how people can accept their choices, just in my opinion right now, which is always flexible, I love the idea of the opposite of vegan being animal exploiter, because it's so encompassing. Yeah. Because somebody who has a pony and takes the pony out to a fair for kid rides and has a nice little home at the end of the day, it's not necessarily abuse, because the animal feels loved, the animal is feeling accepted. It's exploitation, on the other hand, because you're exploiting their labor, and that pony would not be in that scenario if he or she wasn't sold, their body wasn't sold, that was not seen as a commodity. If somebody didn't want that pony anymore and say, well, you take this pony, I'll give you $100 for it. And they take the pony. While the animal may be loved in their new home, it's still exploitation. If you're exploiting the bodies of innocent beings that are not your own, and it's not your body being exploited, it's exploitation. And people who participate in that exploitation directly, they're animal abusers. People who directly participate in rodeos, in the bullfighting arena, in dog fights, they are animal abusers. Those who profit from it, they're exploiters. People, consumers who consume meat, they're animal exploiters. They're exploiting it. They're not the direct abusers, but their exploitation is financing the animal abusers. Yeah. Does that make sense? It's my opinion, but I'm very open to being flexible, but that's just kind of currently where I'm sitting.
In the odd outreach, when I've felt the right that I've been able to, and maybe they've called themselves I'm a meat eater, and I'll say, well, actually, considering veganism is about ethics, what do you think you should be called? What's the opposite of being an ethical vegan? And I'll let them try and and they can't come up with it, of course, because they don't want to.
Mm.
They don't want to admit it would be unethical.
Right.
So that's why they want to.
Do you believe you're exploiting? Yeah. They'll never say they're abusing. They don't look at their choices and say, I'm directly abusing an animal. But you could easily connect with someone and say, do you believe that your choices are exploiting other beings? And they'll say, yes. So you're an exploiter. The conversations that we have with the people we outreach to, yeah, they can tell us F off. But if we cut deep, now feeling guilty. So they start knowing and they start realizing that
I think
we had an impact.
I think it's
we cut through.
It's easy to be against an injustice that you don't participate in. It takes courage to be against an injustice that you do.
Yeah,
I think that's a powerful way to end our work today. And I've had a blast, I will say that. And we are definitely going to be meeting up again and again. You are the founder of the Vegan Action. Well, let's call it a movement because we're only just getting started and we're moving forward 3 years in, and then sometimes there's just a switch. So you can be at it every single day. And, it's like people who are instantly famous. They're not. They've been at it for years. You've been at it for years. And, we're at a trigger point where something is getting big. So I'm looking forward to doing more activism, more podcasts with you, and cutting deeper on bigger issues that are also important to us in the animal rights movement.
Same. Thank you very much for your time, Greg.